operations. He's been active more than 20 years, 25 years in all fields of bass and sub-bass music, I would say, ranging from dub, dancehall, dubstep, to grime, and now drone, obviously. He'll be probably known for his project The Bug, which released on several labels and got signed on Ninja Tune in 2006 with London Zoo. He did a project with a British poet, Roger Robinson, that's called King Midas Sound, and it's on the Hyperdub label. And he also has a project called Techno Animal, which later renamed to Zonal. Yeah, that's just a rough idea. You will find many more projects online, but what we saw today was released on his newly set up imprint Intercranial, and it's basically a whole series, Frequencies for Leaving Earth, volume 1 to 5, released in a short time span between spring and summer 2020, so all during the lockdown. And it's a series of 5 tapes, that's cassette tapes, which are all gone now, I think, but you still can get the stuff through his Bandcamp page. It's 5 series, it's like a series of 5, and every one of them has like a slightly different focus or theme, I would say. Maybe you can say a little bit about the initial idea when it came and how it was fulfilled in the end.
Yeah, the whole series, the initial idea was just the title, which came actually the year before lockdown. Yeah, and I worked on sketches. It's bizarre to come up with the title first. I think it's the only time it's ever happened to me. So I started with the title. Because, you know, with a title like that, it's about big questions, you know, big philosophical question marks. And I was due to fly from Berlin to Mexico, and I started work on sketches on that flight. But it just sort of, after that trip, nothing happened with it. It just dissolved with the idea. Yes. And then, in the year of, you know, the curse of COVID, I found myself in a new city in Brussels, and I'd moved there literally the day before all borders were closed between Belgium and Germany. I'd moved from Berlin to Brussels. We were due to move maybe a month later, but we planned maybe 4 months ahead of the move. And just watching the world collapse on a weekly basis, and just the chaos that was happening, it was getting incredibly worrying how we were going to move. And maybe 4 days before we moved, I basically said to my wife, I think we're really going to have to get out of here, or we're in a very bad situation, because we could have effectively lost the apartment in Brussels. We'd given notice to our landlord in Berlin. I'd given notice to my studio in Berlin. If we hadn't decided to move in those 4 days, the border was obviously going to close imminently. As it was, I had no idea it would be literally the day after we moved to Brussels. And for 4 sleepless nights, trying to find a removal company that would take us, because most removal companies in Berlin refused to go to Belgium because they were worried that their drivers wouldn't get back into the country. Trying to find any form of transportation, because flights were cancelled left, right and centre, trains were cancelled. And I had a family of 4, you know, 2 young children of 7 and 4 years old, and my wife to look after. And for me, the stress levels were through the roof. They were astronomical, you know, and you find yourself in a new country where they were taking Corona a whole lot more seriously than Germany was, whereby it was like walking into a dystopian nightmare. And I was brought up on science fiction. My mum was a science fiction addict, so from a very young age I was just head in the box watching all science fiction. But to be in the middle of, like all of us were, in the middle of your worst nightmare, raises a lot of very big questions. And then on top of it, once we'd moved, I mean, we'd moved essentially to an apartment that was unfurnished. And in Belgium, it was impossible to go to any shops. Everything was closed instantly. There was curfews. It was mental, you know, it was just insane. And in an unfurnished apartment without curtains, without lots of furniture, trying to just keep sane in that situation was a challenge. And it became obvious that I was watching all my shows being cancelled one by one, as my agent was telling me that all, like us all, you know, our livelihoods were being directly impacted, and wondering how the fuck I was going to pay the rent, you know, support the family. And it just drove me inwards, as most artists do, I guess, in those situations, if music is your therapy. And it was just crucial to me to get my studio set up as soon as possible, to try and find some stability in my mind. And out of that came, the title kept recurring in my head. For spiritual reasons, I guess, artistic reasons, philosophical reasons. And I just started this endeavor of using it as almost a monastic retreat and constructing the pieces or the albums that you heard pieces from today. So that was a very long question. Answer, sorry, to a very short question.
That's good. Yeah, and actually what came out of it is quite a huge body of work, which is also quite diverse. There's, for example, in the first volume, there's 3 like 20-minute long pieces. Then the second is kind of like the opposite with 10 shorter pieces, right? Volume 3 is described as your gospel album. You used that notion once. And Volume 4 refers to your, like you said, your science fiction history with Tarkovsky films. So how did you decide to make these different volumes? Was it just you had the first one finished and then?
It was pure instinct, you know. You could try and intellectualize about these things, but in the midst of the apocalypse of the brain that was last year for most people, I think it was just, you find a spirituality in yourself. I'm not a religious person at all. My parents were, but I wasn't. But for me, music is one of the few things I have faith in, because it's what I've always turned to try and understand the chaos we all live in, you know. And just coming up with the concept, there wasn't an essential concept for each tape or each volume. It was just, after each one finished, I set myself the task of where my mindset was for the next one, and just reacted instinctively and philosophically.
Yes, and you also released another whole album last year, Return to Solaris.
Yeah, I mean, it's unheard of that I've got to say this. You know, I think like Roger from King Midas Sound was joking with me last year, just saying like, what the hell, you know, you normally take 3 years on an album and you've made about 10 albums in a year. And I think it was just literally panic, terror, you know, and just what to do in that situation, like us all. You find your path. And luckily my family really understand my craving to make music, you know, and I make music for a multitude of reasons, but it's the core of who I am as a person.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk to musicians how they dealt with the whole crisis, it's either they had like a complete emptiness and also like artist crisis, or more in your direction, they in the end got very productive.
Yeah, I mean, it also, there was other factors in that the years leading up to to COVID, the music industry was already crushed, really. There's already in crisis. You know, there's too many artists, not enough venues, not enough shows per artist. And when you're, you know, when it's your means of survival financially, you're asking yourself questions constantly. And also, you know, as you get older, do you want to play in clubs twice a week, every week, month after month, just to pay your rent? And it was already very much at the forefront of my mind that I knew that the side that you heard of what I do today was there 20 years ago on God Records, or on Techno Animal Records. We made an album with Techno Animal called Re-Entry, where disc 2 was a whole disc of imaginary soundtracks for films that were never made. And basically, that side of me was there, but through the bug and the sort of meteoric explosion of London Zoo, you just find yourself in a situation which is out of your hands. You become this sort of one-dimensional character, almost a cartoon character. You know, I'm Mr. Skane who destroys sound systems and ears, you know, and to try and break away from that is a big task. And I'd already said to my agent 4 years ago, I wanted to get more work with sound design, if possible, film score work. I mean, the first Bug album is actually a reinterpretation of a movie called The Conversation by Francis Ford Coppola. So none of this is new, but the media is so slow to keep up with an artist and wants to keep you in this, you know, box-shaped entity that you're not really allowed the room to move. But my natural instincts is always to move, and freedom of thought and freedom of movement are all the more crucial in times where you know, populism breeds nationalism, breeds knee-jerk reactions, you know, and you know, in the last, you know, decades, in Brexit, you know, just.
Yeah, I mean, I did not even originally want to go into that, but
Yeah.
I can imagine for you as a person coming from the UK, living on the mainland now, the Brexit situation makes it even worse artistically. I mean, did you have any gigs in the UK, or what's the situation like?
I had to cancel the launch party for Fire because of some corona-related issues with vaccine passes that were being altered in the UK. It's not a sob story, you know. It's like everyone is having to live through this. You just deal with it, and your instincts are to survive, you know. And that's what I'll do. I'll keep mutating and morphing because that's what I do anyway, musically, you know.
I quickly want to come to Pedro, because he's not only involved in the live thing, but he was also involved in the making of the thing. How did that come along?
I thought you meant Pedro was going to come here. Well, basically, how did it come along? If I remember correctly, Pedro maybe remember better than I needed someone in a hurry to do artwork for the sleeves, because I was turning the records out fast. And I liked, Pedro and I had talked for years. We'd met at festivals first and then in Berlin, and we talked for a long time about collaborating. And I was a fan of how his approach to his art is based as a craftsman. Because I see what I do as a craft, you know. Texture is crucial to what I do, and I know it is to Pedro, you know. But, and a large but, is that I generally am very skeptical about audiovisual musical performances. I've always generally found, many times, they're a bit disappointing, you know, it's a bit of an add-on. And it just so happened that I went to, I think it was a tonal in Berlin, and actually it wasn't a musical performance, there was an installation that really caught my eye, because it reminded me of the impact it had on me psychologically and physically, was how I would imagine Brian Geison's Dream Machine was with William Burroughs, you know, because I was mildly hallucinating watching this crazy installation. And I messaged Pedro to ask if he knew who was responsible, and lo and behold, it was Pedro. So I knocked on Pedro's door, really, and just said, okay, this is good. And Pedro then had the idea that we try and do it as an installation, music, collision, live. And I was up for it.
Yeah. I think it worked really well. I imagine I'm sitting in like a cosmic comet storm in the last piece or in the beginning also, and I think the visuals are crucial part of this. Yeah.
Well, what's nice is Pedro improvises with the visuals as I do with the music. There's a set core to the music and to the visuals, and he moves around that set core, and so do I. And I think that what you saw and heard today was different to how we performed it and presented it 2 days ago in Prague, and that was the first performance of this music and the visual presentation. We'd never played it live before. So for us, we're learning as we go, and I'm enjoying the whole experience because it's so completely immersive on stage, even though obviously I'm at work. I'd rather be out there. But yeah, it's an enjoyable collaboration because it's evolving, and it will continue to evolve all the time. It's not set.
Yeah. Whereas your tape series with Volume 5, you consider it as a finished piece, is that right? Or
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I think I've released maybe 3 more solo albums since then.
yes.
So yeah, but this concept, this mood, this atmosphere, yeah, for me is a concise 5-volume brainstorm.
Yes. I repeat it, I only can recommend, you can check it out on his Bandcamp page. That's Kevin Richard Martin.
Correct, yeah.
On Bandcamp. And I think let's open it up to questions, if there are any. We cannot give the microphone to the audience due to COVID, so if you just
Shout.
shout, raise your hand, then shout. There's one here.
Yeah. My question does not necessarily refer to this project now, but for things, first of all, blessing us with the sound and also with the visuals. You just mentioned that you kind of wanted to move away from like kind of the picture that is given with the bot, but you released apparently a new album.
Yeah, it wasn't that I wanted to move away, because I'm still that animal inside, and that is a crucial. The bug shows are just catharsis. It's just energy, exploding energy. And I feel fortunate that I discovered in myself that I needed that, and it gets rid of all the negative shit that builds up inside me. So I'm not in a hurry to stop doing bug shows, but the necessity to play in clubs 2 or 3 times a week upon week, just drains you, like mentally, physically. So it wasn't about stopping the bug and just doing this. It was about just making it even more apparent how my brain works and how I work artistically.
Is it also like usually you kind of perform with your real name?
Well, the first album I released under my real name was it was a tribute to my son and my wife, because my son, in the first weeks and months of his life, had 2 very serious life-threatening operations, and the second one didn't look like it pulled through. And we lived in an intensive care unit for 2 months. And I ended up making an album, which sounds really trite. I have to say, after those big statements, I made an album. It was because I was in awe of how a baby can survive in those circumstances, and how my wife pulled through as well, and to try and understand what I'd been through, because it was insanely traumatic. Because at the birth, I was whisked out of the operating theatre, not operating theatre, that's too grand, but out of the birth room, and there was an army of doctors and nurses because my wife was bleeding so heavily, and I didn't know what was happening, and I was told I had to hold the baby because skin-to-skin contact is crucial at that time. I was terrified, you know, and things didn't get much better. For a couple of weeks, things got good, but then, bam, big operation. A month later, a huge operation because he had necrosis of the intestines. And it just so happened that the only show that I didn't cancel as a lead up to knowing I was going to be a parent was this performance called Sirens, which I performed in Berlin for a friend. And the bizarre thing was, well, not bizarre, ironic, the performance happened between the first operation and the second operation, and the week of the first operation, the doctors and nurses said, "Oh, he's great. You know, you're good now. At the end of the week, you're going to be gone." And that was the same week of the performance. We went as a celebration to do this performance, which was called Sirens, but it was a symphony for siren, bass noise, siren, bass and volume. It was titled, and it was my sound system, which I had in Berlin. And we thought it was a celebration. We hadn't seen our friends for weeks because we were secluded in an intensive care unit. And then when we came back from that performance, literally at about 6 a.m., the nurse was frantic, the surgeon was waiting for us saying, "We've got a big problem." And yeah, there on for a few weeks was just torture. And maybe a year afterwards, CTM asked me to do that Siren show again, and I incorporated more elements. And Lawrence English, who ran the label Room 40 that released the album, was in the audience and heard that and asked me to make an album based on that performance. And the performance at that point had nothing really to do with my child or those experiences. But when he asked me to make the album, I knew it was so basic and minimal that it would be a very boring album to do what I had done. And I somehow put two and two together and thought, you know, it was of a time and a place that's so connected to my family that I wanted to seriously, you know, address the composition and the concept of what it could be. And I ended up having to put myself through those same ordeal in a way to try and write an album based around all the trauma and stress. I must have been a lunatic, really, to do that. My wife, I think, thought I was just crazy doing it. But that's where I decided that album, again, another long answer, but the context is that's where I decided to release an album under my given name, because I couldn't think of any more personal statement, you know, that I could possibly make in my life. And since then, I just decided I like the idea of releases under my own name with no, you know, no protection, no theatre, no nothing. It's just what it is.
Good to see it, like the multitudes of your sides.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Also, an amazing release.
No, thank you.
By the way, your mother is performing tomorrow.
I know I'm gutted, but I wouldn't be very popular with my 4-year-old and 7-year-old if I take another day off.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm very gutted that I'm not going to see her. If you see her, give her a hug for me. She's a lovely person.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin and Pedro, for this amazing improv morning, noon, whatsoever. Thanks a lot. You played here. You might have realized that you were just playing as part of a jazz festival, which, for God's sake, has the subtitle International Festival for Jazz and More. So, and you played with the Bach and King Midas sound before here at the same festival. And not only that, you also are part of the extreme music series within the festival this year. And a while ago, you gave an interview within The Wire with Stephen O'Malley, or it was a talk with Stephen O'Malley, and you were using the word or the term extreme music. You or Stephen or the interviewer, I forgot. And does this term say anything to you? And if
no,
so,
I actually don't even particularly like the term extreme. Because for me it's personal, and it's linked to me, and it's not, when I like it. Okay, there's a double edge to it. I'm drawn to extremes in art, for sure, but so often extremity for the sake of extremity ends up being a very empty exercise, you know. And I'm more interested in intensity than extremity, really. I would say I see a difference, you know, and you know, passion, fire, intensity. That's life for me. That's the difference between living and existing.
Yeah, any other questions? I think there was one or two. No? Oh, there's one.
What, as you said, was very immersive, what we heard today. But
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
Okay, I'll try better. For me, it was very immersive, the experience today with the concert. You said it's the same for you a bit when you perform, but when you go back to reality, so it was difficult for me because I had to return to the room again. What is for you?
I wasn't joking when I said I'd rather be there than there. And part of the reason I play, and I have a reputation for playing extremely loud, is that's not a comfortable place for me. I'm not an extrovert. I don't need or crave attention from people. A stage is necessary evil for me. And as far as I'm concerned, having loud volume just helps me lose myself in sound and forget where I am. And I'd be a liar to say that I'm 100% immersed as I hope you would have been, because I can't be, because technically I'm having to make decisions and you know, create sound. But there was definitely elements today, and there was 2 days ago, where I was just disorientated in a very, very good way. So that made me happy, for sure.
And do you hear the room? Do you have to adapt to the sound system and how it sounds, or does
very much, yeah, very, very much. You know, and just adapt to the great thing about the two shows is they felt very different to me. You know, and there's enough flexibility in the compositions, and to dub out the compositions and to add elements that it can mirror the mood I'm in, and it can mirror the atmosphere of how I feel the room or the audience is too. You know, it's been really hugely enjoyable doing these two shows, and it's sort of rare that you're off and running like Pedro and I and Go, my soul brother and sound man. We're laughing because it just felt like such a right fit, and working with Pedro, it just seems like hand in glove, you know, and it's beautiful when it just works like that. You're not having to force something for the sake of forcing it to be something. It just works, in a way that is very pleasing.
Any other questions? No? Actually, I have one. Since this is a jazz festival, I read through all your work and the genres, and one thing that's turning up is early. I think it was in the 90s or beginning 2000s. Was jazzcore, which was like I don't know, a handful of bands that were playing jazz but coming from a punk influenced background. I think you were involved in a band called Zoo. Was that
I
befriended?
My band I called God in a subtle way.
Yes.
And it was a direct mixture of what you'd now call noise rock and free jazz.
Yes.
And it ended up being maybe 14 people on stage, all very heavily amplified. I think 2 drummers, 2 bass players, double bass, 3 sax players, electric viola, me screaming and playing the sax, and it ended up with African percussionists as well. And that jazzcore didn't really exist, but what did happen was someone like John Zorn adopted me and my band and got us booked for jazz festivals. And it's really obvious how much people at those festivals and the organisers hated what we did. You know, just like mass exit at every show. But at that time I thought it was a victory to clear rooms. It was jazzcore. For me, that's just a sale. I'm not a big fan of sales terms, you know.
Yeah,
but it was definitely jazz at its heart and core. And the one when you've got a group of 14 people, the music that probably united us most was a love of electric jazz in the early 70s, predominantly by Miles Davis, Pharoah Sanders, you know, Herbie Hancock. But we weren't technically gifted like they were. That's where the punk side came.
Yeah, actually it sounds like an awesome thing to watch, but it's not, like, God is not existing anymore.
Oh no, God
In your
God
name.
died a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, the records are still somewhere.
Yeah, out of print. Yeah.
Okay, so I think if there aren't any further questions, I want to say thank you again for the
Thank you very much.
mind-blowing performance and also for giving personal insights into
Thank you very much.
your background. Yeah, and thanks for Rainer and Enjoy Jazz for setting it up.
Definitely.
Yeah, so have a good Sunday, everybody.
Thank you very much.